On August 15, 1947, as you stand among thousands in Delhi watching the Union Jack descend for the final time, it becomes clear that India's independence is not the result of Britain's generosity or a sudden moral awakening, but the inevitable collapse of an empire that had finally exhausted its wealth, its power, and its illusions of permanence. Britain, battered by World War II, drowning in debt worth more than twice its GDP, and unable to finance its global ambitions any longer, was forced into a financial retreat disguised as a political transfer of power. For nearly 2 centuries before that moment, Britain's meteoric rise had been built directly upon India's systematic economic decline. Beginning with the creation of the East India Company in 1600, a seemingly innocent trading venture that evolved into the most powerful corporation in history, commanding a private army larger than Britain's own, and gradually transforming from merchant to monarch after the Battle of Plassey in 1757 gave it control over Bengal's vast tax revenues. What followed was a deliberate extraction machine. Monopolies on salt, tobacco, and opium, forced low-price sales that destroyed India's famed textile artisans, and ruthless taxation even through catastrophes like the Bengal famine of 1769-70, where up to 10 million people died, while the company continued collecting revenue, proving that starvation and suffering were not failures of British policy, but the consequences of it. India, which once produced a quarter of the world's industrial output, was deindustrialized so thoroughly through tariff manipulation and market flooding that by 1900 its share had collapsed to just 2%, while British factories thrived by buying India's raw cotton for almost nothing and selling back finished textiles at massive profit. Britain then expanded its exploitation globally through the opium trade, forcing Indian farmers into narcotics cultivation and waging the Opium War against China to protect its drug profits that soon became one of the largest sources of British government revenue. When Indian soldiers finally rebelled in 1857, Britain crushed the uprising with extraordinary brutality and then forced Indians to pay the full cost of suppressing their own rebellion, after which the Crown took direct control and intensified the drain of wealth described by Dadabhai Naoroji, who exposed how Britain extracted tens of millions annually from India while reinvesting practically nothing. Even infrastructure like the railways, often falsely praised as Britain's gift to India, was built using Indian loans, operated for British strategic convenience, and required all equipment to be purchased from Britain, ensuring India bore the debt while Britain harvested the profits. This exploitation peaked during the World Wars. In World War I, over 1 million Indian soldiers fought for Britain. 150,000 were killed or wounded, and India shipped enormous quantities of resources, mostly paid for by itself, while even gifting Britain £100 million for the war effort. By 1945, Britain financed its war through massive debts owed to India, making India its largest creditor by 1945, even as millions starved in the man-made Bengal famine of 1943, worsened by Churchill's refusal to divert supplies and his callous remarks that famine was India's own fault. By the end of the war, Britain was a hollow empire, bankrupt, dependent on American and Canadian loans, and utterly incapable of maintaining control without India's wealth. Thus, in 1947, Britain didn't magnanimously grant independence. It cut its losses and withdrew out of sheer necessity. And when India slipped away, the entire imperial system soon unraveled. In 1700, India accounted for 27% of global GDP. By independence, it was just 4%. But freedom allowed India to rebuild rapidly. Life expectancy, merely 27 under colonial rule, more than doubled within decades. Achievements that revealed how deeply the empire had stifled Indian development. And as America today mirrors Britain's overextension, its global military presence, rising debt, and dependence on maintaining financial dominance, the story of Britain's fall serves as a warning. Empires do not crumble overnight. They bleed slowly, drained by arrogance, overreach, and the mistaken belief that power can last forever. When the costs of empire outweigh its gains, the sun that once claimed never to set eventually fades for good.
If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe.